So we've been going to church ever since I was about 4. And then in 57, we went into the ministry. So I've never known all that uh, life that most teenagers and stuff knew.
Good.
Well, a singing group came through here one time, and one of their daughter, she, excuse me, she thought she had no testimony because she couldn't testify about getting out there and drinking and drugs and stuff, and then God delivering her. But then she realized that the thing that God had kept her from all that was a testimony, it was a greater testimony, and it is.
Yeah. Well, I think I've talked long enough in my testimony.
Yeah.
Yours was good, Violet.
Yeah.
It was very good.
Go back that far on my.
But Violet, I already forgot what it was. Come on. You can
Went
do it
back
again.
to the 30s.
Yeah, but Carol, by not starting back there like that, you're cheating us.
I wish I had some of the people that have emailed me on. I should have gotten some of their emails and put them together to read them, but it's amazing
Yeah.
the people that have found us, and they say that they watched Daddy years ago, on BETV and stuff when we were on satellite. And a lot of them are from Africa, all kinds of places way over there that you wouldn't even, that was his whole thing, trying to get on satellite. And a lot of those people way over there have found all kinds of stuff. And now I get emails from them and they're like, oh, I'm glad to see you. Because now they realize that they can still watch us, but some of them missed it when we had to go off satellite. So it's amazing how far it's come. Daddy would be happy.
Yes.
We know a lot of the communist countries now have, they banned all this internet stuff where we can't get through, Russia
Some
and
do and some
China.
don't. Some of them still, I think, have ways to do it, but God
Yeah.
lets people see it that need to see it.
Mhm.
You might not get it, and the person across the street, God opens it up. I don't know.
Mhm.
He's
Hope
awesome
so.
and he's in control. So
Amen.
people are seeing it that
Mhm.
I want to keep going. So, all right, it's on everywhere. It's 10 o'clock. I don't know how many people are going to jump on here. We'll see as they come on, and you can talk and just say anything about any type of miracle or testimony, or it's just family talking. Have a little reunion here.
Well, my first experience was when I moved here and moved in with Pat. We took our friend home
And
and
tell them who Pat is.
my sister, Pat Chavez. Most people remember Pat because she has gone with Bible Explorations for quite a while.
And
she's
now gone. Right.
And so we took our friend home, stayed the night, and Pat got up in the morning and said, we have to leave. Tonight is Passover. And I went, okay. I didn't know what she was talking about. And so we came home and we got cleaned up and dressed and everything. And we went out to Passover. It was my first Passover Seder. And it was so amazing. It spoke to me. And I had never heard of Seventh-day Adventist. She kept telling me, but I kept thinking that she was saying another, church. And I said, why are you a Mormon? And she said, no, I'm not a Mormon. And so she explained, the seventh day Sabbath and all that. But John did a wonderful job of doing the Seder. We all, followed it. There was lots of people there. And then we came back the next day for the first day of unleavened bread. And that was kind of an experience too. And now I don't know what I would do without this church. This is my safe place. When I was wandering around trying to find a church to go to that I could get some information from, most churches don't give you that. They give you a Bible, a verse, and then they talk on the verse, and that's it. And so this is a unique church where you have Sabbath lesson, and then you have your sermon. And it's all Bible based. And you get so much information and you learn so much more than you do going to any other church. And that's my testimony. I'm just so happy to be able to that we're able to still be in church.
I agree. I think it's very nice that, I don't know how we did it, but I know it was God, because, I don't know everything, but somehow it's all worked and just continued. And I know a lot of people thought it would quit, and when we couldn't have church there, what are we going to do? Well, look at us. And we're all sitting here, and maybe
That's
we
right.
can't touch, but we can sit here and hear voices and see your faces, and everything's good this way because we still get to see each other, and couldn't have done it before.
Not only that,
So-
this way we're seeing people we wouldn't see if we were still gathering at Terabella.
That's right. Our church was small. We had more people here, and
Mhm.
more of
Yeah,
them watch everything. So I agree. It's God's been good.
Yes.
And even if
Yeah.
we get something live, this spring, it still won't be, the people that are there will be able to see each other in person, but other ones will be just like it has been on Zoom. So it's not going to change. It'll just be those that want to and can gather and see each other, and maybe they will, maybe they won't, but
Well, Carol, I can say that I'm here because of Pat and her son also. With me, it went back a little bit before that. As some, I started studying Daniel 8, 12 in 1982, and I've been studying that all along. And then one day I went to this anti-one world government seminar over in Nevada. And that's when I was told to go home and study the IRS codes, which I did. I've told this before here. So I went over there and started studying the IRS codes, and it led me right to the Vatican. This is in about 2000. And in that study, that's when I found out that Christmas and Easter were pagan holidays. And so I told my son, because I've been divorced since 1992, that's about 8 years I've been divorced. I said, we're not keeping these holidays anymore. And so in that process, I found out about some things in the IRS code, so I stopped paying taxes and started writing letters to the IRS. And I became not a friend of theirs. And I started getting these letters saying they're going to do all this stuff to me. And I didn't know anybody else doing this stuff. And I was out walking one day, and I've told this a couple times over there. You know, when you feel a presence around you, I felt this presence. I turned around and I heard this voice, just like I'm talking to you. Keith, you're done your part. Now I'm going to do mine. I went home and went to sleep because it was about noon already because I was sleeping very little. And within 2 weeks, I just got in satellite. People know me, I like the Warriors and the Giants and stuff. Well, I was watching this Warrior game, and it was about 8 minutes before halftime. And I had this VHS I had to turn in. It was late, you know, so it was a Blockbuster. And so you have to, you know, go and pay money and turn it in. And this guy that was standing in front of me, his name was James Witt. I was giving him, I don't remember to this day, it was about his funny money or his ID or something. I was giving him a bad time about it. He turned around and he gave me this business card and says, you need to go to these meetings. And so I went and started going to these meetings. This is the same meetings I go to now, but they're in Fresno. Then there was in Hanford and Fresno. And I went there with Fred and met these, there was about, I don't know, 7 or 8 of us in Hanford meetings. And that's when Dave came with another gentleman, Hispanic gentleman from Visalia. It was dealing with a traffic ticket. And I was always talking about, you know, Daniel 8 and Daniel 12. I was always talking about it. And one time, Dave, he handed me 10 DVDs from Shauna. You guys know who she is. I went home, I was halfway through the first video, and I said, this is the truth. And so I went back the next week and I told Dave that, and Dave says, well, you need to come to Bible Explorations. And that's why I started going to Bible Explorations. You see, it was those 2 incidents that happened. One of them was out there along the railroad tracks when his voice spoke to me. The other one was to meet this guy at Blockbuster at a certain time to go to these meetings. And that's where I met Dave. So it's to me, it's so remarkable that those 2 things happened at that particular time. This is why I said from day one, God will put somebody in your way to meet you, and you don't know anything about it, and it's your job to testify for Jesus Christ. And those 2 things led me to meet Dave and Pat, and led me, I didn't meet Pat until I went there, to Bible Explorations. And so I went out there during a feast time. I spent the day out there. I had my white pickup and a mattress in the back. I slept it in the parking lot in my car, and fell in love with it. That's how I met you guys. So Carol, I want you to thank you and your sister for what you've done for me.
Well, I appreciate that. And we appreciate you too, because you do such good either lessons or sermons.
Studies.
Yeah,
And you can
are
thank
great.
John. You can thank John for that, for giving me that opportunity.
Right. Well, Pat's passed away,
Yeah.
but and Dave is in Oklahoma, and he's on dialysis every night at home.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, they're talking to get not a transfer,
Transplant?
transplant, yes. I knew that it was a trans. Yeah, a transplant. they said sooner or later, he's going to have a transplant. He can't keep, doing dialysis every night. But that's, he thought he was doing well with his diabetes, and he was not. And so that's what happens when you don't take care of yourself. People are afraid to go to a doctor. Well, sometimes you have to go to a doctor.
I don't unless I have to, but you're right, Carol. Sometimes you have to.
Well, when you've got diabetes, you need to have that checked all the time.
Mhm.
You need to do that. And I don't understand why he never did it until all of a sudden he woke up and his eyes, all he could see was brown from his eyes.
Yeah, but like I said, I don't go unless it's necessary, but like sometimes it is necessary. But there was some people out at not Arvin, anyway, Lamont, and they had this little baby, and they did not believe in going to the doctor under any circumstances. And of course, the baby died. And so people said, well, if that's Christianity, I don't want any part of it. And of course, you can understand that because the baby should have been taken to the doctor. You don't just let one lay there and die.
No, you don't.
Yes, and I knew a lady when I was at Andrews. I didn't know her, and she was Christian Science, somebody that doesn't go to the doctor and doesn't have the blood transfusions and stuff. And she fell down her stairs, and it broke her leg to where, what is that compound where it popped out of the skin?
Yeah.
And she wouldn't go anywhere, and they wanted to call an ambulance, and she said, no, God will take care of me if he wants me to get well. And she sat there, and they did everything they could. They had, health ladies come in or whatever and did stuff, wrapped up her leg and everything. And she ended up dying.
Mm-hmm.
But she just flat would not go. And I'm like, God gave people brains to figure that out and how to help you. So sometimes they get a bad name. I know that some of them just, oh, how old are you? Well, here, take this pill and take this one and stuff. So I know that's not good. But as far as some of those things, you got to go. So that was really
Well, when you see a child that has diabetes, my sister called me many years ago, and she said that her daughter's child drinks a lot, and she says, "Isn't that a sign of diabetes?" And I says, "Yes, it is." Well, it turned out he was a diabetic. He's in his 20s now. He's been a diabetic this whole time. But Cindy, his mother, babied over him this whole time, made him do this, made him do that to take care of himself. And I remember we had a infant in the emergency room one time. His blood sugar was over 600. So we sent him to Valley Children's. And we looked at those parents and said, that poor child is going to be lost, because they did not have doting parents that would be looking over them. We don't know what the outcome would have been, but you can tell sometimes by looking how much that the parents are going to care for that child. Because diabetes diabetes is a 24-hour a day thing that you have to look at when you're a diabetic.
Yep.
Yes.
And if not taken care of, it causes a lot of problems too.
Yes.
Well, my brother takes very good care of himself. When he first found out that he had diabetes, he took care of himself. He changed his diet and all this other stuff. And he controlled it with his diet. And then, of course, it got worse, and then he had to start taking medication. And, so he just takes care of himself. And I don't know if Karen still has diabetes. She had gestational diabetes. So I don't know. I don't think they go to the doctor at all. They don't, they never seem to have any money for health reasons. They've got money for everything else but going to the doctor and getting things taken care of. Make sure that you're okay. At least have an annual checkup.
Well, sometimes pregnant women will dip into diabetes during the pregnancy, and then afterwards it'll leave.
Well, she was on the heavier side, and she said she had, still some high sugar sometimes.
Yeah.
And so, I told her, I said, you need to go to the doctor and, get it managed. Oh, I'll just lose weight and that'll take care of it. And I'm going, all right, whatever you're going to do. But that isn't how you were raised. I took her to the doctor for her annual checkups or whatever.
I know if you're borderline diabetic, losing weight can reverse it. But Keith, does losing weight once you've got it do any good?
Yeah, it will help you control the blood
Okay.
sugar. But one of the best things to do is exercise, because that helps burn off stuff. And see, I'm a borderline diabetic myself. And then a couple months ago, I had a knee problem and this problem. I can't go out and do the last 3 months, I haven't been able to go out and do my walks like I used to. And that's going to start up soon. This is why exercise, one of the things that exercise and metabolism, it's like they fit together. And exercise is one of those things that Mrs. White said that is keys to the health.
Mm-hmm.
Any kind. Abel, you have something to say?
Good night, everybody. Well, I remember about John and Clara. I also remember your aunts and your uncle, Glenn and Jan McDonald. And I remember John used to be a Sabbath school teacher. That's where I first met him. I kept listening to see what he was talking about, and he gave the lessons very good, made it very interesting. And I remember after church, everybody said, we're going to go to McDonald's. And so I tagged along, and we went to Glenn's house. And Glenn was a gentleman that loved to go out to the street, door to door, hand out books. He did quite a bit of work. So I joined him, helped him out for quite a while. And then I remember that's when John started asking me, will you help me? And I wasn't too sure what he wanted. And so I went to his house and we talked, and I asked him, well, what are you planning on doing? Then he told me he wanted to put all the Seventh-day Adventist doctrines in those VHS, the big ones that used to be back then. And we did the Sabbath, the State of the Dead, we did the Sanctuary, and so on and so on. And then all of a sudden, he started having meetings, just like we heard Keith say, he started having meetings about prophecy, which is something I had never studied. Actually, I never studied at all when I was in church. We just listened to what the pastor said, and we had the Sabbath school lessons. That was it. And I started hearing about prophecy, and like Keith, I got very involved in it. Wow, I've never heard this stuff before. All I remember was the Sabbath. Just keep the Sabbath. That was it. And I remember John explaining to us about the prophecies and the future, so on. I got so involved in it that I wanted more. I wanted to hear more. But at the church, you didn't hear it. There was nothing at the church about prophecy. And I kept thinking that, what's wrong? There's something wrong here. So that's when I started joining John a little more. And then I noticed that the church was getting mad because I was joining John more. I was going to his house more, studying more, learning. I think they didn't like it because I was learning more. And I would bring up questions and nobody had answers. And then I remember also Glenn. He's done passed away way before John and Clara. And I remember him, he kept telling me, well, I'm not too sure about my brother-in-law, that John. I don't know about these feast days, if we should keep them or not. And I asked, well, do you think we shouldn't? He goes, no, I can't say that. So I'm glad that he was, even though he was related to John, he had an open mind. And he wanted to study it too. He wasn't a guy that said, you need to listen to John, he's right, everybody's not. No, he himself didn't understand the feast days, but he was studying. And so I like that he was open. And that's what I liked about John and Clara. They were open to anything. If you brought something up, they didn't agree with me. They said, well, you guys remember what he said. Well, we need to study this a little bit more. And that's the way I remember John being open-minded. And that's how I learned about the feast. Then I met David, Keith, and everybody else. And I go, wow, I like this family. A lot better than the church family. You see, at church, I noticed something because I was a head deacon there for quite a while. There's a lot of gossip in the church. I mean, a lot of gossip. We would get together with the elders and so on, and all they do was gossip. And I kept thinking, this is not right. Elders are somebody we're supposed to look up to, spiritual leaders. I didn't see that. Even in the Lindsay Spanish church, I didn't see that. I helped them. They were building a church here in Lindsay, and I helped them every Sunday. And I remember going there, it was a happy event building the church here in Lindsay. But the people, the workers there, the way they were talking and making jokes, and I'm talking about jokes about women and jokes about this and that. I said, this is not right. We're building a church for God. And these guys' conversation is literally from the dirt. I mean, this is not right. Something wrong here in this church. We're building a church for God that Lindsay didn't have before. The Adventists used to meet at little places here and there, mostly in Exeter. Then when they built the church here in Lindsay, I thought, wow, it's going to be a great something that we can use as missionary work here in Lindsay. And let me tell you, it didn't work out. Too much gossip. So when I met you guys, it was different. Your minds were more on the Bible, more on God's word. That's what I was looking for. So that's my testimony on why I'm with you guys. And also one thing, when I joined John and Clara, I didn't bring Alice with me. She needed to make her own decision. I wasn't gonna tell my wife, you need to be with me, you need to come. I was gonna let her make her own decision. And I knew she would, because I knew the people in church. And sure enough, they started telling Alice, you need to tell your husband to come back. Don't go to Tarabella no more. If he doesn't listen to you, you need to divorce him. When they said that, my wife just walked on, never went back. That's the kind of counsel she was getting from. Amazing. But I'm glad the Lord used John, Clara, Glenn, and Jan, all four of them, to bring me towards the truth. And I do appreciate that family.
You know, I can take you back, Abel, before we started meeting in Tarabella weekly, back to Pixley. You came to a little church in Pixley, didn't you? A few times?
I was
No?
never there.
Okay. Anyway, it's a little church with 3 little old ladies and their grandkids. That's it. And the big church in Bakersfield was supposed to take care of it. So they would send up a deacon and an elder to give them a service. But I was up there one time, it's 105 degrees, and there's a hole in the roof where there's supposed to be a cooler. These poor ladies had nothing. So another lady and I decided we're going to dedicate our time to help this little church out. And these ladies that devoted all their life to the Adventist church. And so one time I was up front speaking, trying to, because I'm a baby Christian, I'm not trained or not a preacher, but this elderly couple in the back are sitting there and just nodding their head, and and after the service, John Vandenberg comes up and says, would you mind if I spoke sometime? Go, no, that'd be great. I had no idea who it was. I didn't know he was an evangelist, a preacher. So he started teaching us about the feast. And then the conference comes in and says, well, we're going to have an evangelistic series here, revival, a drive to make this church Hispanic. Well, what about us? They go, figure it out. So we cleaned out Sister Bobby's garage, turned it into a sanctuary, and John and Claire would come, and Sandy and Chris would come, and we'd have a little church, maybe seat 20 people in this garage, converted garage. And finally, John says, you know what? Why don't we move to Tarabella? I've got lots of room there. And guess what? Then people could come from Tulare and Bakersfield and Lindsay and Exeter and all over. And so that's how Bible Explorations actually got going really, really good. And I had been to the feast before too. So yeah, John had quite the thing going. And at one time we had 4 satellites going all around the world, covering every corner of the globe. So yeah, John and Clara really, really did a fantastic job bringing it all together.
They had the camp meetings for a while, but not church. We would
Right.
go over to Pixley for church, and then when everything fell, it was like, we got all this, so why don't we just do it here? So we did, and
Yeah.
our potluck, and it was great. I miss that good food.
Oh yeah.
But, that was good, and we still had the camp meetings, and people would come, and we, it just grew. And then when everything quit, we're still on. We're not on satellite, but we're still on everywhere. So
That's right.
everything's good. Thank you. That was good.
What year was that, Sandy, that they started having church there? Do you
The
remember?
what?
Because I remember that.
Around
What'd you say?
what year?
What year did they start
I
having
don't-
church?
2000.
I moved in 2008 out there. And so it was, when we actually started, it was after that.
Probably 2010.
We went to- Yeah, 10, 12, I don't know.
No, the first
Is that-
time I was ever there for the camp meeting was Passover 2011, and you already had things going then.
Mhm.
But you were talking about you missed the good food. I've got my Bible that I had, the smaller one that I used to carry with me when I came to Terabella. And I passed by it yesterday or day before. I saw this little cup hanging from it and reminded me that I used to bring that to put the sauce in for Carol's stuff. That way, whatever she drink, I'd have this little cup. I'd put my sauce in that little cup and dip it. And I still got it hanging on my Bible case.
Because I remember when they was talking about that, and he says, well, was anybody going to come church here? And I says, yeah, I'll come to church.
Yeah,
Mhm.
the two, she said, Tarabella's gonna have church every Sabbath. Let's go there.
Yeah.
Right.
And so
Nice.
when we started going there,
Like they say, when one door closes, one window opens.
Yeah. Well, I remember back when I first started studying Daniel 8 and Daniel 12. You see, our family goes, as Seventh-day Adventists, goes way back. In fact, I had made a PowerPoint that I couldn't find last night, and it was about James Bond. James Bond met Ellen White at a camp meeting and talked to her, and she convinced him to become a physician. And his story was in the Review and Herald in 1958. And I went and made copies of it, but I couldn't find it last night. But from 1971, when I got out of the high school, I was in the Army. I went to PUC for 2 semesters, and I was in the Army. I did not go to church after that till 1982. And I had moved from Sacramento back in with my parents. And if you look in my garage today, I don't think I showed you that, Abel, when you was here, but on my wall, I have all these cassette tapes. That's from my parents. When they would go to Soquel camp meeting, when they had their little tape recorder and they would tape them. All those are up on my wall. Nobody else in the family wanted them. But when 1982, when I moved back in with my parents, I had my son, Alan, and my daughter, Heather, with me. My ex-wife, she called me and said, you come take these kids, I don't want them. You know, that's how and they've been with me ever since. So my mom, she had me listening to these tapes, and one of, there was, I think there was 5 or 6 tapes by, you remember Hoffman? Joseph Hoffman, he's an evangelist, and he was speaking on demon possession. In there, he says, go into your closet and pray that these things will be removed to you. I did exactly that. In my room, I had this little box closet. I went inside of there, closed the door, and I came out a different person. And I testified that when I was at Bible Exploration. That's when I fell in love with Jesus Christ. Then what do? Well, I went out there and started studying prophecy, like Abel mentioned. And in Daniel 12, there's a 1260, 1290, 1335 days. And the last verse says, you will stand up in your lot at the end of the days. This is for Daniel. And I went and told my dad, I said, you've always told me that standing in your lot is a gravesite. So if these was fulfilled, where was the resurrection of Daniel? And I got the silent treatment. And I know why, because they didn't know. They didn't know at all. And see, before then, when I was in high school, we went to the Crothers Church, and there would be sometimes a Sabbath school. It would be like Bible Exploration. There would be 3 or 4 people there for Sabbath school. So it was, very small. And so my mom said, well, this guy teaches Bible study. He knows. So I went up there and asked him at one of his Bible studies and said, don't worry, Sonny, they've been all fulfilled. And I said, well, when did Daniel stand in his lot? Because I missed that event. That's a very important event. mentioned in Daniel 12. Don't worry, Sonny, it has all been fulfilled. Then I went home to my parents and told them, this guy does not know. And that's when I started studying Daniel 8 and Daniel 12. And after that, every time I go out to the house, because I was always talking about Daniel 8 and Daniel 12, things haven't changed. My mom would say, your dad is studying that stuff you talk about all the time. And I remember one time when I was working out at the prison, this is just evidence. We was running a clinic, and this guy came from the yard, came over to the TTA to be seen by us. And you have to have a reason. I don't know what the reason was, but he turned to me and he says, before we start, Bond, because we call it last name, he says, Michael in Daniel 12, is that Jesus Christ or an angel? And I said, well, that's Jesus Christ. And he says, I knew it. I can go back to my yard now. He had come over there just to ask me that question. So you see, that's how people knows what you stand up for. But you see, this started in 1982 because of J.R. Hoffman, his evangelistic tapes. And so, and I agree with you, Abel, people will go and they will sit there and listen, but their mind is on something else, and they will not go home after church, open the Bible up, and start studying.
I don't know how many of you remember one of the speakers, Alan Fine. Anybody remember him? He used to come here quite a bit to speak. And he reminded me of a Baptist preacher. That's the kind of voice he had. And he would always say, he'd be talking and talking. And if he didn't hear an amen, he was the one that used to say, he would look at all the people and say, give me a break. And it was always so funny because he wanted to hear people say amen every time he was speaking. And when you didn't do that, he'd always say, come on, everybody, give me a break. And I remember he's done passed away, but he had a ministry. I think it was in Texas or somewhere, him and his wife. And he said he was always attacked by the authorities. I don't know what kind of ministry he had. It was a radio ministry, but I don't know what he taught over the air. And he said they would always come to his place looking for something to catch him, to put him away. That was his story. I don't know how many of you remember that. Alan Fine spoke just like a Baptist preacher. Strong. And I remember a lot of speakers, but I don't remember the names. Everybody had their own way of bringing up the feast, bringing up prophecy. Speaking of the Pope, and it was just so much learning that I had never heard of that. Especially about the Pope. I knew it was the Pope, the little horn, but that's all I knew. Nothing else. And now I know a lot, but I know there's a lot more to learn. A lot.
Well, that's one of the things, Abel, if you have someone that says, you go home, figure out and come back and prove me wrong. That will start them studying, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a visit from the Lindsay Spanish, some of the guys from the Lindsay Spanish church. And they asked me, well, who gets all the tithes down there? Where does the money go? And so I told them, look, we're a small group. Yet out of this small group, we got about 4 what do you call that?
Satellites.
Satellites, 4 satellites going all over. I said the Seventh-day Adventists, 18 million people. Yet you guys aren't doing anything. You do here, there, a missionary here, a missionary there. But look at BE. God's blessing it because it's a small group, but it's reaching the whole world. You got to think about that. God is behind BE. Here we got the Seventh-day Adventists, probably now 20 million.
Yeah.
Yet they're not witnessing to the whole world. They got the money for it. It's incredible. I mean, you can see the big difference.
Well, I think it's going in Africa a lot faster than it is here in America.
Yes. I think it's time for Chris to say a few words. We miss Chris.
There you go. Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, remember Chris and David.
Chris and Dave. Hi.
Used to do
Morning.
the Sabbath. You guys
He
used
had
to
a
do
cold.
Sabbath school.
Sabbath school, yeah. Yeah, I've had a cold forever, it seems. It was bad. Today it's getting a little better. But yeah, I've been listening to you guys. It's so fun hearing you guys talk about all this stuff back in the day.
Grandpa.
And with Grandpa, I have so many good memories. Endless memories. Actually, I was just looking at something.
Because he walks away.
Well, I was looking at something, I remember, Dave, you were talking about how BE really got going on 4 satellites and it was all over the place.
Yeah.
And I remember a while back when Pastor David Gates came out and he was sharing a lot of stuff, really cool stuff. And then he got with Grandpa and said, you have a lot of messages in here in the bookstore. And this is really good stuff. You should get it out on the air, way out all over the place.
Yeah.
And then you hooked him up with the right guys, and Mom talked to the right people, Grandpa talked to the right people. And it went all over the place. And I was just looking at something. I've got all these notes from all these different pastors and all kind of stuff. And this is one of them that was really interesting. At some point, I think a lot of us know that even Pastor Gates, a lot of folks in the Adventist church kind of frown on him now because he's gone off the deep end and he funds all these ministries without worrying about how he's going to finance and blah, blah, blah. And he just gets into it all and goes full hog. Well, at some point, he received the book from Grandpa and he read it and he was thinking, I don't know about this. I think you said that he'd give it to his dad and all that jazz. And well, eventually I was looking at some of his videos and he has a lot of stuff in Spanish. And if you translate some of his videos, he says all kind of interesting stuff that I'm not aware of because he doesn't share that stuff everywhere else. As he does so much stuff down in South America. But one of the things that was interesting that he said was, this is so interesting. After some point, I don't remember when this was. I don't have a date on when he said this, but it was a video by David Gates, and he says, "Why did God pour out his spirit on Pentecost? Wasn't Pentecost nailed to the cross?" This is David Gates, and he says, "It wasn't nailed to the cross, or else God wouldn't have used it. When Jesus was anointed high priest in heaven, it was on Pentecost. When did he go into the most holy place? He went in on the Day of Atonement, 1844. So God is still acting on this calendar, and the rest of events are going to happen on the calendar dates too. I believe the latter rain is going to be poured out on a future Pentecost." So that was Pastor David Gates. So after a time, reading the book and studying and looking into it, and I think a lot of people take a lot of time to finally come to the conclusion, you know, that it's there in the Bible. There's plenty of evidence. Even Gates found that out. And it was because the ministry that God granted Grandpa to expand and share. And it was David Gates who came and blessed BE, and then it was BE who blessed David Gates. And I'm not sure what Gates is doing at this point, but it's just interesting how what Grandpa did, it got so big and expanded so wide that it blessed so many people everywhere. So many people, and even Mom talks about people still calling in from weird places out in the middle of nowhere, and they're happy to hear things. And they're blessed. It's amazing. I was
Amen.
mightily blessed. Many great things I learned. Yeah, for me, personally, yeah, I have plenty of little stories, but I just remember not knowing anything about the Bible, period. And then with Grandpa's help, learned everything about Jesus, everything about the gospel, everything about the feast, everything about all the Bible characters. So it was by Grandpa that I learned so much. So for me, it's very important. It was a very wonderful thing. Yeah, that's some of what I have to say anyway. I think a lot of you are the same way when it comes to the feast, at least.
Well, he sure got people to study, you know, that was what impressed me. I'd say, I don't know about that. How can all these other people be wrong? Then you'd look it up and go, wow, he's right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not turning my video on. I'm sick and I'm not feeling well, and I look terrible. But to piggyback on what Chris said, I have been watching David Gates' Red Avenir, which is his satellite transmission from Bolivia, where he's at. I think he's kind of like permanently moved himself and his dad there. His mom recently passed away, but he is preaching the feasts and the Trinity, that the Trinity is incorrect. So he's on the same page. He's definitely on the same page that we are. He preached how the Trinity came into this is probably a month and a half ago, how the Trinity came to be in the Adventist church. And it's not the Trinity, it's the Godhead, God the Father and the Son. And he every feast he actually is preaching about it. So the conference is completely, I think, disowned him or something. But just to fill in.
Well, I remember a long time ago when I was at a Charles Wheeling seminar up in Sacramento. John Vega was there, and Charles was having a conversation with him, and Charles Wheeling says, well, I'm not a feast keeper, but he says, you will find that, he says, I believe that the end time events will all occur on feast days. That went in here and stuck.
Everything really major happens on a feast day.
Yes, that's true.
What's up with Charles Wheeler, or that guy? Is he still around, or?
Yeah, he lives back east. He's not in very good health anymore. You know, age has caught up to him like it has a lot of us.
Okay, anybody else want to speak? We have another hour. We're doing good.
Yeah, I remember when David Gates came in, and John at that time was very happy of what he had done. All the people were coming, they were keeping the feast. And then all of a sudden, David Gates tells John, you need to put this over the air. You need to get on there, which was the satellites. And then you could see John like, is this what God wants me to do? He wasn't expecting it. I mean, he was happy, and he was very happy of how far he had accomplished, and having feast days, celebrations, getting together. Then when David Gates told him that you could see it in his eye that, is this what, is God talking through David Gates to me? And then he started working on it, and it came to be. It was amazing. And I mean, it was a lot of money. It wasn't just a few thousand. It was a lot of money. I think it was way over 400,000 a year. And you
Yeah,
figure,
that's funny.
where does all that money come from? I mean, we were a small group. Amazing what God had from.
Yeah, that is amazing. A lot of money came in because that was hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's interesting. I remember listening to Grandpa. He would speak firmly that he believed that this message would be accepted by 3ABN. And he firmly believed that the message would go through 3ABN. And I was like, I don't know about that. And then after a while, then David Gates came, and I'm sure Grandpa was thinking, well, they haven't accepted. I'm willing. Now let's do it.
Yes.
So then it was just a couple channels over, and there you go. That would have been amazing if they would have accepted.
It went out on the Glory Star. So we did it. People didn't think we could, but it worked.
Well, I still believe that there's a lot more feast keepers in higher up of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but they won't admit it publicly.
Right.
A lot of people won't admit a lot of what they believe publicly to keep from being persecuted for it.
Kicked out.
They will when it's the right time.
Yeah.
Angela, do you have something to say? I know you have testimonies.
Yeah, I almost feel like I'm called to save the Adventists, and I can't save them, but to reach out to the Adventists, because every feast I go, I'm a church hopper. I don't go to just one church. I still live in the city. Pray for me. I'm still trying to move out. I was doing a 13-day road trip. That's when I got sick on day 3. I was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So I stayed in a hotel for 2 days thinking I would recover, but I didn't. So I came back home. I was, looking for country land. I don't know where. I've been looking for country land since 2007. Anyhow, in the Bay Area, we have so many churches, like a dozen churches. And I will visit all of them. And during the feast, I would say, it's Happy Feast of Tabernacles or happy, Passover. And people's faces wince. And I'm like, yeah, we are under, I remember I was at the Japanese church when I first went to Terabella. I kind of invited myself. It's to make a super long story short, I had showed the pastor, well, I'm not going to be here next Sabbath. This is where I'm going to be. And it says Feast of Tabernacles. And he said, be very careful. And I'm like, yeah, they're Jews. I don't, I have nothing against Jews. That was my impression, my first impression. And that's when I met Carl Baxter. And he introduced me to Melissa and his wife and the Doves. I have just the most wonderful memories of it. And I even remember Chris and I talking to Carl Baxter. I mean, I have so many stories of Carl. But Chris, do you remember when he converted us to lunar Sabbaths? And you were like, whoa. And then he converted us. He says, yep. Do you agree this? Do you? Yes. Now congratulations, you're lunar Sabbath keepers. And Chris, you're so comical. You're like, wait. No. He says, okay, now I'm going to unconvert you. I'm going to show you where the error was. Carl, I miss Carl. I miss Carl more than I miss my grandma. She, like Carl, like I even mentioned to it a lot. Like I talked to Kim Hamilton sometimes. And just sharing what Carl said. What was it that he said about this? And she remembers very well. So, or even about the New Jerusalem being a pyramid. Do you remember that one? Not a cube. So I have so many amazing and wonderful memories of Carl and Chris and us being
just before you finish, I just want to clarify, because that might be kind of confusing. Carl is against lunar. He does not believe in lunar.
No, he does not believe lunar.
And so he was telling these two when they were young, I'm going to teach you about it. And by the time he was done, he knew how to do it and how they can convince people. And they were both like, wow. And then he said, okay, wait. And then he went back and explained what he had done. And they realized that it wasn't right. But that was what it was. It was very weird because they were like, wow, I can see how you can get sucked up into that and believe it. So anyway,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Thank
I'm
you for
sorry.
thank you for clarifying, Sandy. Yes, that's exactly what happened, because I think one of the feasts, and I forget the years, it's all like a blur. There was so many people. There's some people from Hawaii there, and then the next feast, no one's gone. Even I think I forgot her Nicholson, or I forget who the names were, but they're all of a sudden all these people are not here. I'm like, what happened? And that's when Carl said they all became lunar Sabbath keepers, and we're like, okay, I have no idea what that means. And that's when he explained, yes, that's exactly what he did. He showed us the error, and how people believe it. So yeah, it's, we always had questions like, where's everybody? There was tons of people here last time. But for them, I think it should be very lonely, because one of it was the Vegas, what's his name? The Vegas sister-in-law, who used to live here in the Bay Area in Milpitas. She became a lunar Sabbath keeper, and I try to explain what Carl shared with me. I'm like, girl, you could keep the Sabbath by yourself on Tuesday, but I'm keeping it on. You're wrong. But no, I have such wonderful memories of Terabella. I still will refer to it as this group as the Terabella group, and your dad and your mom, Sandy. And great memories. Yes, I even remember Keith's night. What is it? The
Night vision
those
goggles.
the night vision goggles, where you can see the aliens. Isaac was reminding me about that like not too long ago. Hey, what happened to those? Remember when Keith showed us those night vision goggles that we can see the alien spacecraft?
You see satellites out there and
That's
stuff.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Abel, this is one of the, I like to ask questions, because you ask somebody a question for them to go study it. Ask them, do you keep the feast? And he said, no, it was nailed to the cross. Then ask them, how do you on-nail 1844 from the cross? Because you've backed them into a corner now.
I've never heard a good answer for that one. I would like to hear a good answer for that one.
There isn't one.
There
Well,
isn't one.
Even the
There is.
pastor of the Japanese church, after we would always, during fellowship meal, after we would sit, after fellowship meal, he'd sit across the table for me, and he would say, tell me of your travels, Paul, because I'm never at the same church at the same time. Sometimes I'd just go visit my home church, right? And I shared the feast with them. I shared what I had been learning. This is probably early on, like 2008-ish, early 2009. And when I asked him all those questions, he says, you know what? He says, Angela, I'm going to be very honest with you. After going to the University Andrews and going to seminary and becoming a pastor, I lost my faith. It took me a couple of years to actually get my faith back. But the things you bring up are very, very interesting, something I would need to study. I gave him one of the new Discoveries book that Sandy had given me, and the DVDs. I provided everything to him. Within a year, he actually left the church because of what was happening in the Adventist schools. Like, because I pulled my son out, and my mom says, you must tell the pastor what happened. And basically at the Adventist school, it was, I think, 6th grade. They had picked up my son from school, and he had an eyeliner on and everything. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? And he says, oh, I totally forgot. It was the Egyptian banquet, and I forgot to bring canned goods for. I'm like, what did you need canned goods for? He says, but the teachers had extra, Mom, so don't worry about it. It was for a gift to the gods. I'm like, a gift to the gods? Like, what was that about? He says, yeah, we had a gift to the gods of fertility. And I'm like, in school. And the teacher already knew me. She'd see me coming and she'd start, her face would turn red. And I'm like, we need to talk, And I've always been, I've been a single mom since Isaac was 2. The teachers, my whole thing is, I worked at juvenile probation for years. And after, I'm like, there's no way that my son's ever going to go to a public school. So, and if I'm going to pay for my son's education, I have to get to know the teacher. We have to be best friends because my son is in your care for most of the day. So I'd always have an amazing relationship with the teacher. I talked to them even before school started, and we have to build a relationship because you have my son, and I put my heart into, I did the best I could raising my son. And in the Adventist school, the first teacher was great. The first year was great, but the second year, I disobeyed God and I should have gone to the mission field. But my son really wanted to continue going to school here in the States. So I disobeyed God because I was afraid of going on my own and just going like Abraham by faith, and I did pay the price. That's another story. But anyways, when it came to this whole thing, I'm like, what happened? I was absolutely upset that happened. I'm like, you guys are seriously joking. Like, this is not even real, that you guys actually did a gift to the gods of fertility. What are you trying to do? Like, what kind of indoctrination are you trying to give our children? My child, the other parents have to speak for themselves, but for my son, this is not okay. And so that was on a Friday. The next day, Sabbath, my mom says, you have to tell the pastor. I told the pastor. He said, okay. And I'm like, yeah, that's what happened, and I wasn't going to tell you because it doesn't matter, but I'm pulling my son out of school. And so on Monday, he was seen at the school and he pulled his son out of the school when he confirmed that was a true story. And the conference was, the bottom line, the conference was very upset that he told me himself, the conference is upset that I pulled my son out of the school because I'm a pastor and I need to be an example. So his wife started homeschooling their child, his youngest child, because he had older children. He ended up moving to Hawaii. He lasted a year there, and then he went to Japan. And I'm not sure how, I think he's still in Japan, but he's now retired. He's not part of the conference anymore. But I'm glad I was able to share the New Discoveries book with him and the videos. And I haven't been in communication with him, but I know his sister goes to the Granite Bay and the Doug Batchelor Church. I still have not gone, but my mom did visit that church and said, Donna, his sister, he wants to know what the heck you told her brother. That I'm sure he's probably a feast keeper now, or doing what David Gates has done, and it's good just to plant the seed. I can't save anyone, but I can share all the truths I've learned, and I share, you share them. This is it. If you guys want to believe a lie, because I totally do not believe in the conference. I believe the conference is completely infiltrated by Jesuits. So yeah, I will not give one single penny to the conference at all. I will help a local church, give a local church offering, if it's something for them locally, but I will not give 1 cent to the conference. And I make that clear. And I let them know. I'm like, where's this offering going? I'm not going to give an offering unless if I know where it's going to. And I make it very clear to the accountant. I'll give it afterwards. I never give an offering during church because I don't know where it's going. So that's my stand. I am totally not. I am follower of Christ. I believe in Christ, but I'm not a follower of an organization. Even though I still consider myself a Seventh-day Adventist. It's a very fine line. I'm not sure if, I'm very unconventional. So that's all I have to say right now.
You were talking about what they were teaching in the Adventist school. I don't know if this is true or not, but according to what rumors you might say around town, the Seventh-day Adventist school here has more of a drug problem than our public schools do.
They actually do, because that was the elementary. I homeschooled Isaac for a couple years, and in high school, he really wanted to go to high school. And so he went to the high school for like a couple years only. He only lasted like I think he only lasted a year and a half before they pulled him out again. But even one time when I picked him up after school, he says, "Hey, they're playing your school." Because I went to a Baptist. I grew up going to a Pentecostal church, and then I went to a Baptist school from kindergarten to 12th grade. So they were playing Liberty Baptist. I'm like, oh, I remember Liberty Baptist. We had a dress code. We could only wear dresses, and the hem of the dress had to be below the knee. So if they had us kneel down on our knees, the hem of the dress had to touch the floor. If it didn't, we were written up. So very conservative. The shorts were like right above the knee, just because it was sports, you know. And so I actually parked the car and got down to look at the game, just watch part of the game, Liberty playing against Mountain View Academy. And yeah, their shorts were a little bit higher, probably like 2 or 3 inches above the knee. I'm like, ooh, they were kind of like risque. But the Adventist girls had like bikini underwear as shorts, like bikinis, bottoms. And I'm like, wait, this is like, and I'm like, because I had worked at juvenile probation for 5 years, I'm like, oh, I want to know who, and the principal's there. And I said it out loud. I'm like, I want to know who the pedophile on the school board is that approved this uniform. This is absolutely unacceptable. And he looked at me and I'm like, yeah, there's a pedophile on board and I want to know who it is. Because this is like, these girls look like little, they look like they're for rents. Not even for sale, they're for rents, and I don't even want to say the other word. You know what I'm talking about, principal, and we had a few interactions, principal, when one of the teachers wrote my son up for saying the SHIT word. I'm like, I have no problem with that word. I say it every single time I drop my son off to school. Isn't that the same teacher that says CRAP all the time? Like I have to deal with the CRAP of the kids. It's that. And the SHIT word are the exact same thing. There is no difference. So I'm not signing that detention or that thing right up. I think this is ridiculous. You guys are full of it. And he says, well, I'm like, don't try to split hairs. It's the same thing. You say the CRAP word all the time too. You're a principal, like this is ridiculous. And he already knew what he was expecting. He was already expecting me to that morning that it happened, because I called the teacher and I'm like, I left her a message. I'm like, we need to talk and I need to schedule time with you. And she called me and she ended up crying. I'm like, look at the way you dress. It's 6th grade teacher. Are you there to seduce the little 6th grade boys, or are you there to teach teacher? You always dress very modestly. And I'm like, and I even told the principal, if I was not fat, I would come to school in a Demi Moore outfit. And she says, haven't you seen Demi Moore, how she posed for Vanity Fair, absolutely nude with a painted on suit? I would seriously come to school dressed like that, because that is what you guys, it's very acceptable here at the school. Yeah, it was my poor son. I think I've totally embarrassed him, and he's, I tried to just be silent, but I can't be silent. I will, if I see something wrong, I will say it. I'm like, yeah, well, you guys better thank God that I am absolutely fat, because I'm not going to do that. If I had the self-confidence, I would come to school with the Demi Moore thing. Anyways, the principal ended up really liking that I was a straight shooter. And at the end of the year, he had asked me, he says, I need to talk to you in the office. I'm like, I need to know what the students think about this teacher or that teacher. There was a couple teachers. I'm like, why are you asking me? He says, because you're the one who has your ear to the ground. I'm like, can't you walk around and listen to what the kids have to say? You can hear everything that happens. You can hear that one little spot right there in the school. And I pointed it out to you. That's a makeout spot. That's where all the kids make out. And one of the science teacher, what was his name? He was there for Mark Smeller, 40 years. I had gone on a chaperoned one of their trips to was it Mendocino County? I forgot. It's one of those. I think it was an Adventist place where they go look at study the sea. He had mentioned with all the parents. I don't know how the conversation came about, but the conversation ended up being where you know how many girls I've taken to get abortions that the parents never found out. I am absolutely, my eyes were like bug out open. I looked around. None of the parents seemed alarmed. Everyone was like in a trance or like brainwashed or mind controlled. And I'm like, you're kidding me. Like he just actually said that. And I asked him again, what was that again? I'm sorry, I missed it. And he repeated it just to make sure. Nobody seemed alarmed. To me, that was a red flag. I went to the Adventist church. I don't know if, I think that pastor had already gone by that time, but I did share it with some of the moms. I'm like, heads up, this is, by the way, this is what Marks Miller said. So you guys are aware that, you know, daughters are getting abortions down the street from where the Adventist church was, a Planned Parenthood, and the parents never ever would find out. So there's a lot going on in the churches and the schools that people are not aware of. So henceforth, if I am completely jaded by the conference or the schools, there's a lot of history and background why. So yeah, it's very sad. So I'm a proponent of homeschool. I think homeschool is the best thing to do, so that where the parents are in control, and you can go to church. You have, you know, play dates with other people in church, you know, and get to, you know, do outings with other people's in church. There's some churches that have a heavy homeschool community. At least the Mountain View Japanese one did. But anyways, I was able to share these things with some of the younger parents, younger couples that I was at the churches, you know, the Milpitas Church, the Mountain View Japanese Church, and a few other churches. You know, they'd always, for fellowship meals, sometimes we'd get together, or for Vespers, they'd be invited to Vespers at different people's homes. And I was able to share. And then I think in 2009, there's a few families who ended up believing because of what I had shared, you know, what the different stories, kind of like the pastor church at the Mountain View Central Church, not even Japanese church, had mentioned, one of the Sabbaths had mentioned, the church is a huge, massive church. It was, you know, not totally full. It was like probably a quarter full. And I was sitting towards the back, and he had, in his sermon, he mentioned how about when he, you know, how he had just been at the Bohemian Grove. And the thing is, like, I stood up on the edge of the bench and said, wait, and I started taking vicious notes. He talked about his experience at the Bohemian Grove and everything that went on, and why he was there, how he got there, who invited him. And I'm like, okay, this is why the church is in the position it is. I mean, I don't think nobody seemed alerted or anything. Like, that was red flags for me. And I was able to share that with at Vespers with the young adults, the couples that had just barely young children. And when I had shared, actually, I shared it at a fellowship meal one time, and it was at one of the round tables that was at the Milpitas Church. And they said, we're having a really hard time believing that. I'll get the recording. It was actually, because I got the recording. I went back to the church, got the recording, which was a cassette. I don't think I ever got that cassette back, but they afterwards they said, Angela, you're absolutely right. You did not make that up. I'm like, no, I did not make that up. Why would I make it up? I mean, going to the Bohemian Grove, that is like, we've been infiltrated, by the way, you know, in case you had any doubts. And I would never have grown or learned what I did if I had not been one of those, the church hopper. You know, on Sabbath, I would start praying, and I praise God. I want to get back to that, you know. I'm having some autoimmune health issues, which are like debilitating. So I'm like, Lord, either I need to be healed. I can't just keep going on with this, or, you know, either I'm going to be laid to rest or healed, so I can keep on going forward. But
We know, because you're what you're doing, you know, who doesn't like that?
yeah, I know.
He may be making you sick. Going back to what you were talking about schools, I can remember when I don't like to name names, I'm not going to, but Chris was in school, and he was in a church school, and he came home and was telling me different things that were going on. And finally, when it came time, I think it was the semester, I don't think the year was over, maybe the year was over, but he said, Mom, that school costs money, it's not good, don't send me back. And so we put him in public school. And he was telling a lot of things that were going on. So I went and I knew a lot of the people because I went to church there, and they were letting the good teachers go. And they made you think that they were just moving on. And I went and talked to these people, and they were sad to have to leave. And they were conservatives. And I said, well, what makes them have to go? And I said, why? And it was about clothes too, and the clothing. And some of the girls were allowed to wear things that, their things would show when they sit down, and the little boys in the back and all this kind of stuff, and their bellies and everything else. I was like, why do you guys allow that? Why don't you make it so they have to, at least wear something more modest? Well, it comes to find out that the wealthy were the ones that ran the school. And so they were the ones that allowed it. And if someone tried to go against it, they would lose money. And I'm like, if you did something the right way, in God's way, don't you think he would bless you? And you'd have even probably more money. So it was pretty sad. But that's
I remember that. And it was my Bible teacher that they let go.
that they let go.
And he was a good teacher.
Yep.
I remember that.
And they didn't really
remember-
say why. I don't think they were just different excuses and different things. They had to move on. They got other people in. They didn't need this class or didn't need that. But when I got down and started talking to them, it was really sad how it all had to do with money and the people that, the liberal people that were wealthy, that their kids wanted it this way. And so their little girls had to dress this way. And I'm like, how sad.
It is
So
sad. Even Isaac would have I almost scheduled a debate between that Mark Miller, that science teacher, for 40 years. He's been there at the school. And Isaac, because he started speaking, but because Isaac, I exposed him to the Ken Hovind videos about, what is it, 17, 18 hours on evolution and creation, which were actually accurate. The teacher started saying something, and Isaac had told me, Mom, I just a heads up, the teacher's going to call you, because I interrupted his class and told him he was dumb for believing in the gap theory, that I would have more respect for him if he actually was an evolutionist. So the teacher did talk to me, and he says, I waited 40 years to have an intellectual conversation of someone that was equal to me on the same level. And that was Isaac. I'm like, are you kidding? Because of the Ken Hovind videos in my mind, But Isaac was able to have a discussion where the teacher felt like he was challenged, Isaac challenged his belief. And even Isaac told me that the Bible teacher, what was his name? He was a pastor of the Sunnyvale Church. Sunnyvale Church was absolutely super liberal. They'd have yoga classes there. And he said, yeah, the Bible is just, it's a good, kind of a history book. It's scientifically inaccurate. It's the pastor of a church. He used to be at PUC. And he said that the earth is flat. And, the Bible is, so all these things. And Isaac would just tell me all the stuff that's going on. I'm glad he did, But it is interesting, so if there are any flat earthers, they're coming out of the Mountain View Academy, Mountain View Academy, or the Sunnyvale Church, SDA Church, because the pastor believes that the earth is flat. And lots of interesting things going on. But I almost feel, like I said, I go to the different churches, and I a lot of times I know a lot of people from different churches. Or what happened to, Marilyn? Is she here today? She's not. And I'm like, oh yeah, I've known her for years. And I'm able to interact with people and share with them, like, oh, during the holidays, I go, you have a Christmas tree? Do you know what the Bible says about Christmas? Actually, Jesus was born during Tabernacles, not Christmas. Tammuz was born on Christmas. So it's actually Xmas, because Christ has nothing to do with Christmas. So if you want to say happy, Merry Christmas, I will have to respond with Merry Xmas to you. And I make it a point. I try not to be obnoxious like the Vegas, but there's sometimes I can't help myself.
They say Merry Christmas, you just turn around and says, well, I know it's late, but happy Tabernacles.
Tabernacles, yeah. I have to throw that in. Even one of my friends, Tanya, Tanya Garza, right? She says, please don't get us kicked out of church. Please, you're going to get us kicked out of church. I'm like, yeah, it's not fun if I'm not getting kicked out of church. She says, can we have one peaceful Sabbath? I'm like, no, if I actually go to church on a Sabbath, like I'm not going to church today. I don't want to infect people with, my dad got COVID. So I don't understand how he got COVID and I didn't get it. But Isaac just told me it's because I probably had a cold or a flu already. So if we were exposed to COVID, that there can be only one virus at a time.
There's bunches of them. Well, Angela, there's a physician came to me one time. This is 30 years ago. He's a Seventh-day Adventist physician. And he said, Keith, he says, another physician, and he mentioned his name. He came to me and he says, the women that come into your office with emotional problems, how many of them had an unwanted sexual encounter when they was young? He says, I don't know. He says,
all of them did.
He told him it was 70% in his office. And then this doctor told me, he says, Keith, I started asking, and you would think that it would be lower than 70% in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It's not. And that's a sad state of affairs.
It is.
That just shows what the character has changed from 50, 60, 70 years ago in our church.
Yeah, it is very sad.
He didn't say it was sex. He said, and something sexual that made them uncomfortable.
Wendy, do you have something to say? I see you on here. Any kind of testimony?
Come on.
Maybe I'll make something for another time. Is that fair? I'll put a little
We
thought
don't
into
have to have it prepared. We're just talking. So, okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Dave hasn't said much.
I was thinking when you were talking about the schools and all that, I was reading Ellen White talking about Kellogg and his book, The Living Temple, and how he republished, or he got it printed, and he wanted to print it, but then the sanitarium burns down and the other one burns down. And she's like, hey, there's a problem with this book. God doesn't want it printed. It has error in it. And eventually she made that point, but at a final point, she was starting to write these little tracts. I don't know what she was doing. It was like a local tract for their area in Battle Creek, for their institutions there and stuff. And so she would write stuff just for the people around there. And she started writing, hey, this book is wrong and has error. It's not inspired by God. And she wanted people at the institutions there and the students to know that, hey, if you're sending your kids there, you might have some problems. And there were leadership that were very, very upset with that. And she was making that point. And I'm sure that was hard for her to make that point. And she's spoken about how hard it was for her to do some of those things. But it's interesting to see that. And she also made the point that it was the city was kind of was coming in a little closer, approaching in, and so the students were being they were becoming a little more worldly and whatnot. So anyway, it was interesting to see what happens to our schools, maybe in the country or whatever, but the city comes in, the people come in, ideas from Satan come in, and she gets frustrated and says, hey, there's a problem, and the Spirit of God is not here anymore, so be careful. And so that, I think that's kind of what happens. The Spirit of God is pushed away in some of our institutions, or many of them, and then people in leadership positions are there and they're not supposed to be there, or they're placed there, and over time it just kind of falls apart. And someone was just talking the other day, I've heard it before. Who was that saying? the Vatican or the Catholic Church, it was their job to infiltrate Seventh-day Adventist Church first, because it would be the hardest one. But once they got through that one, they could fly on through the other denominations.
Alberto
And,
Rivera.
Rivera, yeah, okay, yeah, it's probably Rivera, yeah. Definitely Rivera. No, it's interesting. Yeah, Satan works harder and he never sleeps, so kind of what happens. And we're not on our, have our eyeballs open all the time, so we don't know.
It's getting worse now.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, Angela was talking about how used to the girls wore dresses below their knees, and it got to where they had to kneel down, and if their dress didn't touch the floor, they were in trouble. I don't know about elsewhere, but now here in Bakersfield, they wear short shorts to school now. I'm talking about the public schools. I'm never up in the area where the Seventh-day Adventist school is, but the public schools are wearing short shorts now, and I mean short.
I can remember in academy when we wore pants, it had to be a pantsuit and a certain material. And the top of the pantsuit had to come below the hips, had to cover everything. You don't see that now. They wear stuff and it's like, and I wonder why things happen and what happens. And, then women get mad, so we can't say that we should be able to wear whatever we want. Well, yeah, but men are human too. And if you're going to do that to those young boys, that's not right either. So I don't know. It's just a sad place where they're just leaving God out of everything. So they're not humble. They're not conservative. They're anything goes, and it's money talks and spoil the kids. And it's just really sad.
Yeah. It is interesting to see how conservative people were back. Reading some of Ellen White's stuff is very different from the way we talk now and consider things. It's very different.
And you go with the time, she said to, but not to the extreme that they're allowing now. So it's kind of sad.
I think there's some good schools though, maybe out in I know there's some good schools out in the Appalachian Mountains way out there. And there's still some good schools, some good teachers. But Satan wants his hand in everything. And kids are kids, so they do what they want.
And people are also busy, so they don't, they're not able to be with the kids like they used to. And that's sad. The devil has part of that. So.
Well, I know with the school I went to, Almona Academy, there was 4 or 5 families that was very wealthy, and their children can do whatever they want. Anybody else got in trouble?
Well,
On that note, Keith, it doesn't matter if they're wealthy or not, what they make extra donations. The tuition is the same for, never was wealthy, but I always worked hard. And I'm like, I pay top dollar to send my child to this school. Like this is just all equal. We're all supposed to be equal. Kind of like when they, one of the times I showed up early to pick them up, and they had a delivery of Taco Bell. I'm like, are these vegetarian Taco Bell tacos? And my son goes, no, they're all just the meat tacos. I'm like, are you kidding me? I think I stormed into the principal's office at that time. I'm like, excuse me, I just want to know why you guys have meat tacos here. I thought we have the health message of vegetarianism. And that's when I had become vegetarian. Or no, I think I had already been vegetarian since 2007. And they said, well, what? Well, people who have money, their excuse was there's a lot of people that are not from the church that are there. I'm like, it doesn't matter. We're supposed to be ministering to them, not them ministering to us. And that's what I see happening. So yeah, money, everyone has to pay. Does anyone get free school? No, we all have to pay the same amount. So when it comes to this whole thing of having money, the rich people, like, I'm rich too. I pay, or do they pay double the amount of the tuition that I pay, or what? So that'd be my stance on that.
But some of them
let me
made
tell you a
large,
funny story
some
that
of them made,
happened years ago with Chris. And he was a little kid in West Covina. he came home one day and he asked me, which one he should pick. It was a,
Hamburger?
or a cheeseburger.
I don't know,
It
whatever.
was a hamburger or a cheeseburger, something. They were going to, well, they didn't say what they were doing. Whatever it was, anyway, he picked cheese because he thought it was like a cheese sandwich and he knew he didn't eat meat and he didn't understand what any of it was. Come to find out, the next day they went to McDonald's and got him all what they'd chosen. So they got him a cheeseburger. So when he started eating it in class, he was in second grade or so. When he started eating it, he didn't like it. He didn't finish it. He didn't know what it was. Man, like Angela, I went down there. I'm like, excuse me, what did you feed my son? Well, he put down there the cheese one. And I'm like, he doesn't eat meat. I said, what if it was somebody allergic? It could have made him very sick. He never eats meat. And he gave him a McDonald's cheeseburger, which I'm not saying anybody things wrong. People aren't going to hell for it, but
Yeah, what's up?
for him, he was not a meat eater. And for them to choose that, and it was an Adventist school. And I was like, why are you doing this? That was right before Thanksgiving. Come to find out, they were having a lot of parents come in for Thanksgiving meal. Well, in my mind, I would think if you're an Adventist school, you would promote health. If people want to eat meat, that's fine. A lot of potlucks even allow them. But for the school to do that, they were roasting big, huge turkeys. Well, again, it's not a sin to eat a turkey. I don't care. But when you're doing it for health, people come in and they expect to have health food, something healthy. But all these were non-Adventist or whatever coming in. And so they were doing all this meat stuff. And I was like, that's just, kids go there expecting to eat a certain way. When you go to and I can remember the Adventist hospital, I think it was White Memorial. One of them made a big, huge thing about how they had a very famous pastry chef. And they had pastries that were extremely delicious, but so unhealthy. And they were having that for the people there, plus meat and everything else. I'm like, what are you guys doing? It's all gone. It's just lost. So that's really sad. But that was kind of funny when he came home and then I found out that was what it was. It was a cheeseburger or hamburger, and he didn't want a hamburger. He wanted the cheese. So I thought it was grilled cheese. He wasn't. He did not like the flavor of that. And
Yeah. It's gotten pretty backwards. That was a long time ago.
yeah,
I don't understand that. I don't understand.
that was sad. Anyway, anybody else have something to share or how they found either the feast or Sabbath or anything? Just
I'd like to mention that as a group, we're on the right road, keeping the feast. Because if you look at the book of Esther, they got the death decree in the book of Esther. And you can see right away the feast are in there. The death decree was on the 13th of the first month. The next day was the 14th, which was Passover, where the Lord promises to keep us. And if you notice through the feast, he promises that we're going to have a death decree pretty soon in the future. It's going to be the same thing as it was in the book of Esther. And so we're on the right road, keeping the feast, and not only keeping them, but understanding what they mean. And it's all protection from God. God protects us. God cleans us. He forgives us. There's pardon. Everything the gospel is supposed to teach, we get it to the feast. So there's no other place to go. Talk about church here, church there. There's nowhere to go but here.
And the feast lead you right to Jesus.
Yeah.
what made it sad or what makes it hard is because even when I was in Ohio, and I started believing the feast, understood them, you can't say anything to people and you feel kind of uncomfortable because they do all this and they decorate the church. And of course, I always loved Christmas. But when you try and say something where you just stay away, they think something's wrong with you and they can't just accept it and leave you alone about it. It's like you're shunned and it just makes you feel uncomfortable. It's like, what happened? So what if I believe this? You have your camp meetings, who cares? Just, you don't have to believe like I do, but the way they treat you just makes you feel bad. There's a lot of people that way and it's sad.
Yeah, well,
By
here's
the way, Abel, I have to tell you, if Daddy was here, he would just be beaming with pride for you.
Well, beaming
How
pride.
far you come and he let you, where you started and then you talk and all your little sermons and stuff in your studies. Daddy just be happy as could be.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
here's my thing on the feast. It is a very simple thing. To summarize, I'm trying to do my story very short. I was a Sunday keeper and I worked for the county of Santa Clara in January of 2007. I was in one of those confidential meetings that said that there was going to be a national ID that was going to be required in May of 2008. Well, that's like a year and a half away, And since I couldn't mention it because it was a confidential meeting, I went online, I found an article that mentioned it. And then I sent it to the family and say, hey, I have red flags. This is alert to me as a Sunday keeper. Our view of Revelation is completely different. To me, that can be the mark of the beast. If it's a national ID card, what the PIN number is in your head, kind of like an ATM card. You put it into the ATM with your hand, the pin's on your head. That's a mark of the beast, hand and forehead or her forehead, right? So I heard that there was a seminar. If you want to know what it basically was, I was listening to the news. All of a sudden there was a commercial. If you want to know what the mark of the beast is, we're having a Revelation seminar using the Bible only. And I, registered. It was in Hayward. So I drove 50 miles to Hayward. And it ended up being a John Bradshaw revelation. At the end of the seminar, I didn't, Isaac kept turning in, but he wanted, first of all, that he wanted to get baptized. I'm like, Isaac, first of all, you're supposed to be doing your homework, not even paying attention. You can't, this is a cult. I'm positive this is a cult. I just can't prove it yet. Anyways, it came and went. I ended up becoming an Adventist a few months later. And then that's, fast forward a couple months, is when I got the country message. When I had gone to Tahoe, I went to an Adventist church. You can go anywhere and there's an Adventist church. There was a little booklet about country living from Ellen White. I read it and I'm like, we're supposed to be country living, And I looked up, I went to the ABC store, bought a book from Jerry Franklin. And I read the book, highlighted it, had some questions for him. I contacted the publisher. They contacted me with one of his people, and they said, well, I need to talk to him. I have some questions, or he's going to be in California. And I think it was September, October, I forget when. And that's when I went to the Feast of Tabernacles, invited myself to Terabella. I'm like, oh, that's not that far from where I live. It's just like a 4-hour drive. So I got there. I think it was Brad Scott. I got there in time to hear Brad Scott, and then there was a break, and then Jerry Franklin was going to speak. So when I heard Brad Scott, Hebrew 101, it just blew my mind. I'm like, wow, this is totally amazing. I was totally excited to hear that message. I went to my car. I was going to sleep in my car because he was going to have another message the following morning. I was going to sleep in my car and then just go home after that. So I was making my smoothie in the back of my car with a shaker bottle, right? And that's when what's his, oh my goodness, Carl Baxter walks up to me and said, hey, what are you doing? You have a can of paint? I'm like, this is my dinner. So I downed it, and he says, your dinner? And I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of invited myself to hear Jerry Franklin speak. I wanted to hear him speak about country living. And then he says, okay, I'm gonna go, come with me. I'll go introduce you to my wife and a few friends. So that's when I met Melissa, Linda, and the Doves. And so they had invited me for dinner. I'm like, I already had my dinner. Thank you. But in their trailer on the table, I sat, on one side of the table, and Linda and Melissa sat on the other side. And they asked me, basically, how did you get here? And I told them I'm a new Adventist. And they opened Leviticus 23, showed me, how the Sabbath is a holy convocation. The feast is a holy convocation. And to sum it up, they said, do you accept the feast? I'm like, yes. If the Bible says it, yes, I accept it. That's simple. you know? And they're really, and so after that, we went to the session, and there was a few more sessions, I think, after that. And Melissa told me afterwards, he says, that's why you believe so quickly. I'm like, why? He says, because you're taking notes. As the speaker, I see you taking notes. I'm like, yeah, I want to be able to reference these references and key topics, key thoughts that I have to go back and reflect on. And they're all, yeah, you're not NLP, you're not neurolinguistic. That's why you believe so quickly, And my thing is, it's simple. How can you not believe in the feasts unless if you've been, brainwashed or something? If it's in the Bible, it's simple, and I was not one of those lifelong Adventists. So I hadn't gotten to the point where it's been nailed to the cross. After that, yeah, the topic came up. No, there's been nailed to the cross. I'm like, okay, when and where and how, And then, but I am so glad I was able to go to Terra Bella so shortly, within months of becoming an Adventist. So the feast is a very simple thing. Who cannot understand? Just Leviticus 23, nailed to the cross is just like that's a Jesuit move in the Adventist church. So I just wanted to say it's a simple thing to accept the feast, and those who don't are actually not open to the truth. That's it.
That was good. Thank you.
One
It's
thing I
late,
learned
it's 11:45. We can keep going. What?
one thing I learned about the feast is that Ellen White says in the future you might be called to give a testimony or something through the court. And we're told that through the feast on the day of Pentecost, just like the day of Pentecost, God will send his spirit and he will talk for you when you come into the courts and they start asking you questions.
That's
I mean, there's so much promises that we can see in the feast, all the protection he's going to give us in the near future. And that's what I can't imagine how anybody could say they were done away with. So many promises for us.
Yes. On that point, I just want to say my own personal opinion on something. I can remember when people used to say, because of Mrs. White and the Bible, you have to memorize the Bible. You have to memorize verses. You have to go over them and over and memorize them, because one day you'll have to say them. And I have read it differently and different things she said. If you read it once, it's in your mind. God can bring things back to your mind. And it's not, it's good to memorize things, but if you don't have everything memorized, some people fret like I can't memorize that much. Just read it and study it, and God can bring it back to your mind when you need it. And he's somewhere, it doesn't say that it'll even be some writing that you can read when you're in front of the court. I think I've read that somewhere.
I think that's what A.T. Jones, he said it was like it was written. He didn't say it was written in front of him, but it was like that it was written in front of him.
So he brings it back to you and you just read it.
Yeah.
So, that's good. And we will be in front of there. We do need to know and study things, but
Yeah, that's the reason really we need to study. And so many people don't read their Bible. But if you study the Bible, then like you say, when it's necessary, God can bring it back to you. But if he can't bring back to you something you never knew.
he can give it to you, I suppose, but
He could give it to you, yes, but I'm talking about he can't bring it back.
right. Well, I have seen, I don't know how many people that I know on Facebook, both maybe Adventist or used to be Adventist and non, tell me right on there, they just read the Bible through for the 5th time, all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, really? Did you really read it?
But
I'm
the
sure they
question-
did, but you can just skim through something and
Mhm.
they evidently aren't studying it when they just read it through, and they don't believe Sabbath. They don't believe anything else. And it's pretty easy to understand, a child's supposed to understand it, but I don't know. It was all for back then, and they make it complicated, and it's like, why take something pagan when you have so much good in the Bible to share?
to really understand it, we need to read it prayerfully and ask the Lord to open it up to us. But so many people that do read it just read it like another book.
They don't know the author.
Right.
Right. Very good. Yep. Well, anybody else have anything to say or?
But it's like Keith just said, you can know about somebody and their whole life story or whatever, but it's different than actually knowing them.
Right. It's nice to see so many on here, and I think, I don't know how many are watching other places, but there's several on YouTube and Roku and everything else. So hello to everybody, and I'm sure somebody else has something to say. Keep going. Anyone?
Well, I was just thinking, I think someone said it the other day too, when they quoted Ellen White. Unless you're daily advancing, you will not discern nor receive the final message of the fourth angel and its power. Yeah, because you need that spirit every day. You need to search every day, learn every day.
Yep.
And I was listening to the pastor actually the other Sabbath, and he was talking about, he says, he was giving it to the audience kind of hard, like you need to be reading the Bible every day. You need to be like Ellen White says, not going to enter a house where those people or the family doesn't read the Bible, 1 hour, at least 1 hour every day. He says, he was saying, need to read the Bible. And he says, there's a lot of stuff that gets in the way, blah, blah, blah. And he made the point, I'm a pastor. I went to school to learn this stuff. I love this stuff. I'm a man of God, but I have the same troubles as everybody else. And I got stuff in the way. I got lots of stuff to do, but I make time for God every day. And I thought that was nice to hear such a thing coming from an Adventist pastor. Yes, that's what Ellen White says. And more recently, actually, in our home, it's been very, very difficult to take that kind of time. With 2 little boys and a whole lot of stuff going on. But I knew that at some point, at some age very near and soon, that we needed to have full-on family worship. And so we started doing that. We were doing that very consistently. And then I got sick too. And but we still do it. Either I do it with our big boy, or Sarah does it with him, or we all do it together. And it's a very good thing because it transformed our little boy. And it's interesting to see how he started. When we started, he's 3, and he had so many issues. He would bounce all over the room, and it was so obvious that Satan was like, this is not going to happen. I'm going to make it frustrating for you, and you're not going to want to do this. And he did, but it was very obvious what was going on. And so we continued, and Sherry was here. Sherry was helping us in the very beginning. Yeah, and that was very difficult. And I don't know, it took whatever. Didn't take too long, a couple of weeks before he was full on enjoying the story time and enjoying the prayer afterward. He enjoys saying the prayer almost every time now. and kneeling on his knees. So it's interesting to see if you devote yourself to something with God and prayer, like she says, daily advancing, you can discern and receive a great blessing. And that's just a little family worship time we have. Other times, personal times, is very important too. And but it's just interesting to see how it's been very good for him. And it's amazing to see. We talk about God all the time, and he brings up God. Like during Tabernacles, we went out in the tent, and he's looking up, and we're talking all about how Jesus may likely come during this time. And so he's looking up, and then we go back inside the next day. We gotta go to the tent. Go to the tent. Jesus coming. Jesus coming. God's coming. And he said it so loud in the backyard. The neighbors, I'm sure, are hearing him. God's coming. It's coming. Let's go. I'm like, okay, let's go out there. So anyway, daily advancing, it is important.
And he likes the thought of going to heaven and it's good and the good people.
Oh yeah, it's the Garden of Eden and the Tree of Life that he talks about all the time. He's gonna eat one of those apples. Sometimes he says, "I'm gonna eat all the apples." You gotta save some of the apples. Okay, I'll save some of them for. And then he goes off on all the people, for Poppy and Grandma. And I think sometimes he mentions some of you guys. I'll save some of them for them. So that's nice. That's real nice.
But each morning, the first thing we need alone time with God and word and prayer, or if we are a family, the family do it together. But we need to put word and prayer the first thing every morning, and actually the last thing every night, as far as that
I do it
goes.
all day long.
Yeah.
Ed and I do devotions twice a day, just like the evening and morning sacrifice. We think that that corresponds to that. And one thing we started doing many years ago is we take the hymnal and we sing together. And not that either one of us has any talent. Ed has a nice baritone, but we really don't have any talent. And I can strum a few chords on a guitar. But that really added quality to it. And I wonder if your son, Chris, would enjoy singing little
He does.
Jesus Loves Me songs and stuff. Yeah.
He does.
Yeah.
They both do it. He'll get his guitar and
Yes. And
Sarah
that
sings
adds,
with him. And he knows
that's
the Sabbath
quality.
songs.
Mhm.
It's cute.
He's getting to the point where he'll strum it, and I'll play the other hand, and we'll all sing.
Nice. Yeah.
Let me tell you a really quick story.
Um,
I think it was night before last. Elijah does not like thunderstorms. And when they happen, it's a boom and it scares him. So the song about, what's that song about the lightning hums and then
Flashes.
lightning flashes and then the thunder booms or something, that song?
Oh, yeah. I
He
think I know
sings
that
it
one.
in Sabbath school. Well, they started teaching it to him.
Uh,
So the other night it was gonna rain. It was very cloudy a couple nights ago and he disappeared. And I said, what is he doing? And she said something about he wants to sing the song. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he went all the way down to the basement where I am, got a light that doesn't have a shade on it. It's just a light that's plugged in, lamps. He drug it all the way up here. How he did it and didn't break the light bulb, but he carried it out. And I said, what is he doing? I mean, he unplugged it. He unplugged everything that was there, carried it up here, plugged it in, and then he sat there and he sang the song and he would flash the light, the lightning.
my goodness.
And she said, that's what he's doing. So every time the lightning flashes, it was cute. So he knew all that and he was looking outside. So I just thought that was cute.
Oh, yeah.
Clever little man.
Yep.
But
Yeah, he loves those songs. Sometimes at lunch we'll sing. I'll get the guitar and I won't get the guitar, and I'll be standing there, and he'll look up at me and he's eating. He's like, music.
Oh,
Get
nice.
the guitar is like, what song do you know? David, and David, swings his sling around, and Jesus loves me, and there's always ABC, so we have to find the chords ABCD. But
It's
it's,
got a good memory, very sharp. Good memory.
yep. Raise them up right when they are young, and when they are old, they will not depart. I don't know exactly how to do that, but we will work on it and pray about it. Yeah.
Well, God will help them. It's still their choice. So
Oh, yeah.
there are a lot of people that say that and their kids are not well, but hopefully they'll come around.
Yeah.
Be their choice.
Yeah.
Well, it's about noon, you guys. Anybody have anything else to say? That went by fast. I thought it was good. We went through the whole 2 hours.
Yeah, it was good. It was informative.
Very interesting.
I got one more thing to say. I don't know how many remember the tent, the youth tent we had way in the back.
Yes,
Well, I brought that home with me after we were cleaning out Terabella.
Mhm.
And I said, well, I wish I could put it up because it used to take us 4 or 5 individuals to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know, the Lord said, you can do it. And guess what? I set it up. And I have it set up in the back to remind
Amen.
me, of Terabella. And I mean, it was easy to set up. I couldn't believe it by one person. Where I remember we need 4 or 5 individuals to do it. So one of these days, my prayer is that one of these days I'll be able to use it to have a small group of peacekeepers.
Where do you live, Abel? We'll be there.
A big town, you might say. Lindsay, huge town. You might pass it if you blink your eye.
Yeah, you said a big town. I was thinking, yeah, a mud puddle in the road.
You could even hit the Spanish ones that we couldn't because we don't speak it.
Oh, yes, yes.
Invite me, Abel.
Yes.
I'll go and I'll break out my rusty Spanish.
There you go.
Okay,
it's
well,
been
Abel,
great
you want to have a
listening.
closing prayer? Go ahead, Violet. I'm sorry.
I said it's been great listening to everybody this morning. I've enjoyed this very much.
Okay. Abel, you want to have a closing prayer?
Yes. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for all these years we spent at BE. We thank you, Father, for showing us that you're right behind the message. It's your message, Father. We thank you that you've been leading all these years. I thank you for each individual that speaks here, that our group has. We thank you, Father, for all the blessings you've given us, all the knowledge. Please continue to be with Sandy and Chris as they make decisions for the future. We pray, Father, that you will continue to show us and get us ready for your soon return. We pray for the sealing. In the precious name of Yeshua. Amen.
Amen.
Man.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody.